It was a while before I really saw Austin again because of all the traveling that I was doing, that he was doing with Noah. And I remember on around like October, both of us being back in Florida and him coming in and like seeing him for the first time after I got back from LA. And I was so excited and just anxious and sick to my stomach to see him all at the same time because I missed him so much and there was so much I wanted to catch him up on, but I didn't know how he felt about me. And I remember seeing him and running up to him and giving him a hug because I had heard that he got in a new car, and that was something we had talked about for like over a year, is him getting a new car, and I was so excited to see it. And he was like kind of like cold towards me, so I asked him to go see his new car, and he was so kind. Like, he was always respectful and nice to me, but I could tell there was walls up between us, and that killed me. But I knew that I was the reason why he had built those walls. So I really couldn't fight them, but I was frustrated with them because I was frustrated with myself and me not being able to establish how I felt like he did, and just all of these emotions that were inside that were never let out or verbally spoken into existence so that he knew how I felt. And then a couple days passed and it was Halloween, and I will never forget this day because this was a day that completely changed the trajectory of me and Austin's relationship. I remember us walking around the neighborhood and like him not really talking, and I was like so bummed because I missed him so much, but I knew it was my fault. And so I kept talking and he wasn't talking that much, and there was so much to catch up on for each other, but he really wasn't saying anything. And so that was making me even more sick because it was just like solidifying the fact that I thought that I lost him, and it was a complete disaster. And obviously when all that tension is built up, at one point if it's not talked about, which is why it's so important to communicate, it just like erupts. And one of the moments when we were walking, just realizing that like he wasn't gonna talk, like I couldn't get to him anymore, like that was over. And so I was like, you know what, Austin, I think I'm just gonna walk by myself. And I turned around and I started to walk and I started to like cry. And in that moment, like, he wouldn't let me walk home with myself. He's just not like that. And so he like didn't matter if he was 100 steps behind me, like followed me. And when I realized he was following me, like it made me even more sad because I realized how good of a guy he was, and I just didn't like myself and I didn't like the situation, and I was still so scared. And I remember like turning around and just being like, why aren't you talking to me? Like, what, why, and what's going on? He basically like was just telling me like, I don't know what you're talking about. And we were just getting frustrated because neither of us wanted to budge at that point. Like he had his walls up so bad that he wasn't gonna wear his heart on his sleeve, and I understood that. And so I was upset because I like knew that it was my fault, and like I couldn't break that pride off of myself, and that fear ultimately what it was off of myself. And we went back and forth. It was a really intense conversation that we had for probably about 3 hours, and then it, you know, it kind of came to like a head where like I didn't even think we were gonna be like friends anymore. Like my worst nightmare had come true. We weren't gonna talk. It was gonna make our whole entire family and friend dynamic like weird. And I remember getting home that night, going into the garage, and Austin not saying anything like he usually did, and him going out to his car. I remember thinking in that moment, if I don't say something now, it's never gonna happen. You know, I've got to make sure that my pride is not getting in the way of something that could be God's will or something that is so good. So of course, like, me and Austin were not on speaking terms, and I ran outside to his trunk, and I remember looking at him and just telling him, you know, like, I'm so sorry that I had like an expectation, or I like thought that you were gonna treat me a certain way when we weren't dating, because it's true, like I expected him to treat me like we were dating when we weren't. After that, I think he said like, what do you mean? And I just said like, I'm not gonna expect you to treat me like your girlfriend if I'm not your girlfriend. And he said like, well, like what does that like really mean? Do you want to see if there's something there? And I told him, I was like, yeah. And that took a lot for me because that was like something I was so fearful of stepping out. And we decided that night that like we were gonna see if there was something between us.